Welcome back to the Pistons Jack YouTube channel. On today's episode, we'll touch on the Pistons roster as another player was waived earlier today. We'll touch on some comments from Jalen Duren and why I think this five-man lineup is going to be key for the Pistons next season. And we'll do a little bit on Cam Thomas with some new information that came out today as well. So let's get to it. Okay, so let's start first of all with the roster movement from today for the Detroit Pistons. First of all, I want to clarify some information yesterday that ties in with, as you can see here, the Pistons player or Motor City Cruise two-way player that was waived today in Ron Harper Jr. So before I just talk about this a little bit more, on yesterday's show, I said that Colby Jones, who was signed to a two-way yesterday, would be taking the position of Dennis Jenkins, who Jenkins was a free agent and could be signed. That was obviously incorrect. I should have put two and two together. The Pistons' two-way positions had been confirmed by Amari Sankofa. So in light of Ron Harper Jr. being waived today, as reported by Keith Smith on the right, Amari confirmed that as of right now, the Pistons' two-way players for the upcoming season are Dennis Jenkins, Colby Jones, and Tolu Smith. Now, I just want to clear that off straight away. And I should have honestly put two and two together. Like, obviously, Ron Harper Jr. wasn't at Summer League, which was a surprise because all the other crews and two-way players were there. So that should have been my first instinct, but I was wrong there. So apologies for that. It's certainly, whilst Dennis still could be upgraded to a full-time roster spot, that thought is on hold for the time being. Just in my thoughts on this, I was actually kind of hoping, I was really excited to watch Ron Harper Jr. at Summer League, to be honest, mainly because he was just a flat-out volume scoring shooter at the Motor City Cruise, at the G League level, I should say. So last season, he had a game where he hit 11 threes, which was a franchise record and still is, obviously, for the Cruise. I think he scored like 40 points, maybe 38 in that game, but on the season last year, he was giving you 18 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists, a steal, and did so on 44% shooting from the field, 39% on 8 three-point attempts per game, which is a pretty elite number, and nearly 90% from the line. Now, he only played one game for the Pistons, game 82 against the Bucks, which I think he scored a couple of buckets, but he didn't hit a three. It was one game in a pretty weird style setup in that last game of the season. But look, obviously the Pistons have gone, we're more interested in Colby Jones, who's replacing, because as you can see with these two-way slots, the way you want to have each of these set up is you probably want to have a guard at one, a forward at the other, or a wing type player and a center. So obviously it feels like the Pistons going, well, Colby Jones, 6'6", forward, wing, little bit of a guard. We're going to replace the 6'4", 6'5" Ron Harper with him. Ron Harper is definitely a better shooter. I don't think there's any question about that. But I think Colby is a little bit bigger, a little bit more athletic. Without diving too much into either of their games, to be completely honest with you, just looking at the numbers and watching a little bit of tape, that's what I can gather. So I think Colby has a bit more of two-way potential. So look, once again, these moves won't define the Pistons' success next season, but it's we're in late July, so every bit of news is worthy on reporting. So let me know your thoughts on that. Like I said, I was kind of keen to see Ron Harper Jr. get a go at Summer League and play some big minutes. Didn't happen, so maybe he's going to the Spurs G League team on a two-way. That's just my guess. But moving on, I want to touch on some comments from Jalen Duren here. So earlier this week, I believe, maybe even on Sunday in Detroit, the Big Three hosted their 3-on-3 competition at Little Caesars Arena, and Jalen Duren and Ron Harper. Ron Holland was sitting courtside, and Courtside Buzz on X were at the event, and they went up and interviewed Jalen Duren. As you can see on the right here, Jalen Duren was asked about the backcourt of Ivy and Cade, and JD said, "Sky's the limit. They don't have no ceiling, man. I feel like our team doesn't have a ceiling. We've got a lot of young guys growing and getting better. Ron Holland, who's going to go into his second year and looking to make a big jump." So look, these aren't crazy comments, but I wanted to just talk about Ivy here and Ivy and Cade's fit. But really what I'm getting at here is Ivy's fit with the young core, because I feel like what we saw last year was we saw Cade, Duren, and Asar show for the most part that if you surround them with a four-man that can shoot, like Tobias, and someone that can shoot and, be some sort of threat from the outside of the two, that results in great. Like, that's a real thing you can build around. And many smarter NBA minds than me have said that such, like Zach Lowe, for example, was big on that trio. And I feel like because we saw that and we saw it work in the playoffs, like the Pistons had one of the best starting groups in the per net rating in the playoffs. The one that was Cade, THJ, Asar, Tobias, and Duren. It was one of the best ranked starting fives. And look, they only played 6 games, but it was the Pistons' best starting five last season in anything that played more than like 100 minutes. And it got me thinking, because I think a lot of us, a fan base, is quick to write off Jaden Ivey because they're like, well, we saw that you don't need Ivey. You just need someone who can shoot at the two. And, we need to be looking more at like just a bigger guard that can shoot and support Cade more on defense. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but what I want to push back on is in that. So the big thing last season for me, first of all, was Ivey played 12 minutes with Asar. Pretty much when Asar got back to being a regular part of the rotation and playing more than like 10 to 15 minutes, Ivey went down with that broken leg, as we all know, to start the year. So they barely played last year, and it feels like Asar was the real key thing to unlocking this team defensively, because when he came back and was starting, they were just a different team. And I think the big problem they had when Asar was out is that they had to start Tim Hardaway Jr. at the 3, and Ivey was obviously at the 2 with Cade, and those lineups struggled because the Pistons defensively just didn't have anyone to take bigger ball handling guards. So where I'm going with all of this is that while some might say, well, look, when Ivey was healthy, their net ratings, their lineups, the win-loss wasn't great. And my pushback is, well, yeah, because they didn't have Asar. They didn't have one of the best perimeter defenders in the league. And then when Asar was healthy and ready to be that guy who we saw, Ivey goes down with such an unfortunate injury, and we never get to see him really with Asar. And what I'm going back on is, if you recall back in the season before, the horrible 14-win season that we don't really want to think about, but there was one thing I was thinking about when I was drafting up my notes for this video, and because I was just trying to think, how can I articulate this with some data and to back up my point that I'm a huge believer in Ivey, Cade, Asar, Duren, and Ron, but Ron's still only in year 2. And it got me thinking. I thought back to when the Pistons traded for Simone Fontecchio. And Fontecchio came off the bench for the first couple of games, but he was quickly put into that starting group. And in 100, I think they played, I've got it here, sorry, just one second. They played in 113 minutes in that season. The 5-man lineup of Cade, Ivey, Asar, Fontecchio, and Jalen Duren had a plus 3.8 net rating. Now, that's not amazing. It's good. Anything positive is good. And it's not the biggest sample, but it's over 100 minutes. To have that net rating in that type of season, where everything that could go wrong did go wrong, is huge. And I think as a proof of concept, it shows that Ivey, Cade, Asar, Duren, plus shooting 4-man results in a positive outcome. And let's just remember, this is rookie Asar that got this net rating. This is year 2 Jalen Duren. This is year 3 Cade Cunningham. This is year 2 Jaden Ivey. Like, these guys are much better players than what they were in that season almost 2 years ago, or will be 2 years ago by the time next season starts. So it's like these players have all developed. And then the big upgrade is you've got Tobias Harris, who is a major upgrade, as we've seen, from Fontecchio at the 4. So I'm a big believer in that starting 5 for this season. And yes, Ivey isn't the volume 3-point shooter, or hasn't proven to be the volume 3-point shooter that Tim Hardaway Jr. was, but he still shot 40% on 5 attempts last season. Gives you a lot more juice off the bounce. I think he gives you more defensively than Tim Hardaway Jr. It's not a huge amount, but THJ just has his limitations at his age. Shout out to him for taking those charges, but outside of that, he was quite easy to get by. I'm not trying to slight him, but I just think Ivey was being considerably younger, has a lot more to offer defensively. So I'm telling you guys, you should be excited for that. You should be very excited for that starting group, because I think it's going to be absolutely like I think we're going to have a lot of fun with that 5-man group. And I expect that to be the starting 5, and it should be. barring any injuries or players not being able to suit up. So let me know your thoughts on that 5-man lineup. Am I crazy to think that that's going to be electric? I think there's some really solid numbers there, even if they are a little bit dated, that show the proof of concepts there. We just got to see it and see them all together. So I'm really excited for that. Let me know your thoughts on that. And what we're going to end today's show is an update on the Cam Thomas situation. So yesterday we did a video on Cam Thomas being, or the Pistons being, the odds-on favourite to land Cam Thomas per, I think it was Bovada Sports. I can't actually access the website from here in Australia, but it's American sports betting company. And the reason I'm bringing this back up is because it was reported by Jake Fisher today, as you can see on the right, that the Brooklyn Nets offered Cam Thomas a 2-year deal with $14 million team option. Now, we all thought Cam Thomas wants 25 to 30 million. I did not think the Nets would lowball him that bad. I thought they would probably do something around 20 million. But the reason we're talking about this is we don't care really about the Brooklyn Nets. But the reason I'm talking about this is because I brought up the idea yesterday of the Pistons using their $14.5 million trade exception to acquire Cam Thomas. And it did seem very unlikely even just then discussing it, because I think everyone just thought there's no way Cam Thomas is going to only make 14 million, which is basically mid-level. But as you can see, that's the offer he's got in front of him. And because he's a restricted free agent, another team's got to throw something at him or something better to get that, for him to make any more. So, because he's kind of stranded unless So the way the Pistons, the reason I bring all this up is how the Pistons can acquire him. Because in light of this information that came out today, I've seen a lot of Pistons fans saying, well, let's put Sasa and the trade exception together and get Cam Thomas. I just want to reiterate, the trade exception, you cannot send back a player. You cannot combine Sasa's salary and the trade exception. You can only use the trade exception's value. Hence, to do a sign and trade, you have to send a pick out. So for the Nets to do a sign and trade with the Pistons, you have to send out at least a second round pick, because that's the lowest rating pick you can send out. Obviously, you could send a first. But the Pistons, in theory, can acquire Cam Thomas in a sign and trade with maybe multiple seconds in the 40 million or a first and that. Not saying they do that, just saying that's how they can acquire him. They also can acquire him. The only salaries they can really use to get him for anything close to 40 million is Jaden Ivey and Marcus Sasser, who combined for 13 million. But Cam would have to be less than this deal, which I can't imagine Cam would want to sign. So, because the Pistons, Karis LeVert's making 14.5 million, but himself, any player that re-signed or signed with the Pistons can't be traded until December 15th. So those guys, Duncan Robinson, Karis and Paul Reed, you can't use their salaries. They can't be a part of a trade until December 15th. So that's enough on how they can acquire him. I just thought it was all worth bringing it back up because of what we're seeing, the reported offer to him and how it fits with Detroit. And maybe when you put it all together, because I put this in the comments on last video, but a couple of weeks ago, we did a video and spoke about a rumor in relation to the 4 restricted free agents in Giddey, Kuminga, Thomas, and Grimes. There was a rumor that a Pistons staff member had said at a golf day that the Pistons are interested in one of those 4, but it's probably not going to happen. And I thought it was Kuminga, but maybe this is all coming together, that this is why Cam Thomas has been rumored to the Pistons, or not rumored, disregard that. Why he's an odds-on favourite to go to the Pistons is because of this type of intel that seems to be floating around. And to be honest, when I didn't talk about Cam's fit on the team, I think if Cam Thomas does come to the Pistons, I certainly don't want it to be for Jaden Ivey. But if he does, I think it would be in Marcus Sasser's that role. I think he would obviously play more minutes. He would take minutes. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but because him and LeVert, it feels like would be, if they're both coming off the bench, it feels like they'd be playing a very similar role in terms of at least how much they have the ball. So look, it doesn't make a lot of sense at all, but I just wanted to address it to wrap up the show here. So hope that makes some sense. Hope that clears up how they can acquire him, because the Pistons have no cap space. They're an over the cap team. They can only use a trade exception, the $5.1 million biannual exception to sign someone, or vet mins. They are over the cap. They had to be an over cap team to get the trade exception, I believe. So that's going to do it for today's show. Hope you enjoyed. Appreciate all the support, all the love on the channel recently. And we'll be back soon with another video, but until then, as always, go Pistons.